Hi, and welcome back. Now we're going to look at target action from a less simple case. We still have a zip file, and this is just the view, and I've used the same color that we did in the first demo. And in our view controller, notice that the header file for the view controller actually contains no properties or methods. The method that I'm going to use is not an action method per se, it's just a void method. So let's go ahead and look at that. First of all, I've got a method here called makeButton, and this is internal to the implementation, therefore private. I've also got a method here called ButtonTap, and in viewDidLoad, I call the makeButton method on self, and that will call this method here. Now, these are private methods. There is no need in this implementation to actually put a button on the zib and link it up or wire it up to our ButtonTap method. Here, ButtonTap has no parameters. It's just a ButtonTap method. And here in ButtonTap, I set self.view.background color to UI red color red color by sending the red color message to the UI color. By the way, if you aren't familiar with UI color or any other object type or class in Objective-C, you can simply command click on that object that you're unfamiliar with, and you will see the header file for that object. And we can see color with red, green, blue, and someplace down in here we can see, yes, the convenience methods to create colors. And I've used red color, which is this method here, which sets us to all red, no green, no blue in RGB. Okay, we can get back to the view controller by selecting it here in the navigator panel. Alright, so what happens here? MakeButton is called on self. So here is MakeButton. MakeButton sets up a UI button as a button with type round rect, or type UI button type rounded rect. And a round rect button, a rounded rectangular button, is the default button type. If we grabbed a button in Interface Builder and dragged it to our interface, we would get a rounded rect UI button. So we've set this button up. Now we have to do some things to set its frame and so forth. So we set a button rect, a CG rect, using CG rect make. And in the discussion, we talked about these CG rects. This CG rect is really a struct, and I can inspect that in the same way by command clicking CG rect, and I see that this is a typedef struct CG rect. It's a rectangle. So CG rect has a CG point of origin and a CG size. And then CG point is defined as two floats, CG float X, CG float Y, and then CG size is defined as a CG float width and CG float height. So that when I make a CG rect using CG rect make, and this is a function, I make it with the left coordinate, the top coordinate, the width, and the height. And here 100, 100, 150, and 40 will drop the button at those frame coordinates within the view. Then we set the button's frame to this button rectangle. So button.frame, frame is a property of a button. Frame is actually property of UI control, but UI button is a child class of UI control. Then we set the title for the normal control state, for UI control state normal. We just set the title to red. And then here is the important target action method. We call the add target action for control events method on the button. So the target, since we're in the view controller, is self. The action is a selector, and we've created a selector for the button tap method. And here is button tap again. And then the control event that we've used is UI control event touch up inside. Now, if we can't remember that long designation, then we can go back and type our colon and then start typing UI control event, and here we have all of them: touch up outside, event value change, application, event or UI control states, touch drag enter, touch drag exit, but touch up inside is the one we want. So we can simply select it by double clicking it, and there we have it. Finally, very importantly, we must add this view, the button, to the view of the view controller, which is self.view. We add it as a subview. So we add subview, and button is the parameter that we set up. So what happens when the button is tapped for UI control event touch up inside? When that button is tapped, the button tap method in self, which is the view controller, will be executed because that is the action that we've specified for the target self when the event happens, UI control event touch up inside. And so when this happens, the background color will be set to a red color. Now you might be thinking, if you're very alert here, that this UI button is being created as a button object that has a reference count on it. So when we get to the end, what happens? This button might leak, right? Well, actually, unless we use one of three important words, and those words are alloc, new, or copy, unless we use those words in our method that we pass to a control or to anything, to any class, unless we use alloc, new, or copy, we are creating a weekly reference object. So this button has a reference count of 0. And so when the view goes away, the button will go away. And this is what we want. Now, if we alloced it and then used init with type, UI button type rounded rect, we would have a strongly referenced object because we called alloc on it. And a strongly referenced object would end up, once it was placed as a subview on the view, it would end up with a reference count of 2. When the view was destroyed, since the view controller would still have a reference on it, it would have a reference count of 1, and we would have to do something, set it to nil typically, to get its reference count to go to 0 so that it could be deleted. However, this is an auto-releasing object. It is an object with a weak reference count. So when we run this, we have this red button, and it hasn't been done anything with as far as centering or anything. We just simply gave it a frame. It is 100 from the left to the corner, 100 from the top to this corner, and then it's 150 units wide and 40 units high. And when we click on it, the button tap method is executed, setting the background color to red. So this is target action as well, and in this case we can see the target self, we can see the action, the selector button tap, and we can see the event that causes the action to happen. So in code we can specify the target, the action, and the event that triggers the action. So there we go. And hopefully now you understand a bit more about this target action pattern that we're going to be using over and over and over again for iPhone and even iPad development. Thank you very much.